Hello out there, welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan. Together, we're going through the books of the Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy, over the course of this year, a little bit every day. Today, we're going to read Genesis 49:1 through Genesis 49:18. And I'll be reading from the Robert Alter translation, and then we'll discuss. And Jacob called his sons and said, Gather round, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the days to come. Assemble and hearken, O Jacob's son, and hearken to Israel your father. Reuben, my firstborn, you are my strength, and first yield of my manhood, prevailing in rank and prevailing in might. Unsteady as water, you'll no more prevail, for you mounted the place where your father lay. You profaned my couch, you mounted. Simeon and Levi. I'm sorry, I'm just making sure I don't go too far here. Simeon and Levi, the brothers, weapon of outrage their trade. In their council let me never set foot, their assembly my presence shun. For in their fury they slaughtered men. At their pleasure they tore down ramparts. Cursed be their fury so fierce, and their wrath so remorseless. I will divide them in Jacob, disperse them in Israel. Judah, you shall your brothers acclaim, your hand on your enemy's nape. Your father's son shall bow to you. A lion's whelp is Judah. From the prey, O my son, you mount. He crouched, he laid down like a lion, like the king of beasts. And who dare arouse him? The scepter shall not pass from Judah, nor the mace from between his legs, that tribute to him may come, and to him the submission of peoples. He binds the vine, his ass, to the grape bough, his ass's foal. He washes his wine, his garment, in the blood of the grape, his cloak. O eyes that are darker than wine, and teeth that are whiter than milk. Zebulun near the shore of the city shall dwell, and he by the haven of ships, his flank upon Sidon. Issachar, a big-boned donkey, crouched amidst hearths. He saw that the homestead was goodly, that the land was delightful, and he put his shoulder to the load, became a toiling serf. Dan, his folk will judge as one of Israel's tribe. Let Dan be a snake on the road, an asp on the pass, that bites on the horse's heels, and its rider topples backwards. Your deliverance I await, O Lord. All right, and that's where it ends. They don't put them all in one section, so we've got like about halfway through.
I would like to say that it would be very useful if you did a study on the original birth of these progenitors of these tribes and the significance of their name, and you'll see that it comes up again when Jacob blesses them, and it comes up again in Deuteronomy 33 when Moses blesses them. So a package study would be useful to you if you go through the original birth of the tribes and why they were named what they were, then what Jacob says about them, then finally what Moses says about them as a background to then studying biblical history and prophecy after that. So that would be my first comment.
So when he says unsteady as water, you'll no more prevail. There's different thoughts about that. What do you think that's particularly getting to?
Well, Reuben, wanted to do the right thing, but didn't quite get it right, And then later on, he got very emotional and said, "Kill my children," whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed to be not the one that should be getting the firstborn blessing, and he didn't. There are a lot of good things about him, but he's not the one to lead the nation.
Mm-hmm.
It would seem. And then plus he has the issue of what he did with Bilhah.
Right, which is talked about, yeah.
Talked about,
and this is the first time we get that. When the issue actually happens, it just says that Israel knew about it, and then it doesn't really go into anything. And so the question is, did he just wait until now to tell him off, or does the Bible just not tell us, and then it tells us now? But obviously that was something that he did have to take care of, because that was incredibly sinful thing to do, and so he had to. And he uses, and the Robert Alter translation is rather rough in the way that it's worded. I rather like it from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's actually not as literal as it could be.
Interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, I'll have to go back because the way the New King James has it, you know, it's more literal. I don't know why he gets so indirect there, Robert Alter. I guess he just wants to be more poetical about
Well,
it.
what do you mean? What do you think is not as direct?
Well, here is what the New King James says: because you went up to your father's bed, you defiled it. He went up to my couch. And that's very different from what Alter has.
He had, before you mounted the place where your father lay, you profaned my couch. I don't know if that's that different.
All right, I guess it isn't.
No.
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, God can take a lemon and make lemonade out of it. In fact, you see that all through the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of Levi, uh, later on, Levi got its act together in a certain sense, and so
Mm-hmm.
they were scattered, but in a positive way. They
Right.
became the teachers, but also the butchers.
Uh-huh.
So their bloodlust was satisfied
Right.
because they were involved with the sacrificial system,
Mm-hmm.
but also their perhaps intensity was spread out and became a more positive factor.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, you can see an example of that in the kind of in my like in the golden calf incident, right?
right there, they right.
Because you have the problematic forces, I'll just put it that way, and then the Levites have to take care of it. Well, there's only so many types of people that can do that. I mean, you're literally being asked to capital punish people that
Right,
are brothers
right,
and
right.
relatives and all kinds of things. You do need a certain mercenary sort of, a personality to do that, and so there is a place for that. And I think that is one thing that I get when I read a lot of these is that I do think sometimes we get overly hung up on what a view of righteousness looks like. Not that there isn't clear guidelines of sin and things like that, but personality does have a role, and there are personalities that will be more susceptible to certain issues, but on the other hand, those same things can be a strength in another way. And I think sometimes we get to the sameness idea of what a righteous person looks like that is not biblical, that you would be like, well, if we were among a bunch of righteous people, we'd all kind of be the same. And I don't see that in the Bible. I see a lot of examples that people are quite different in just their willingness to do something like that, and what is going to be asked of you is different. I going to the parables, you think of the different laborers and the different time, and people are upset about the equity of that. And it's people are treated individually in the Bible, and there's room for that. There's room for diversity of attitude and personality that I think we can lose. I don't think we should do that.
One minister, uh, had a good comment on the Simeon and Levi that you don't take a spice and pile it all up in one spot. You spread it
Right.
out. Simeon later had its inheritance within the tribe of Judah,
Hmm.
so it didn't really have its own, and initially anyway, its own separate area. Again, I guess because of the violent nature, it was better to have them
Hmm.
in some surrounded by Judah as a kind of restraint.
Right.
Now he also talks about Judah, and as you know, it's based upon the concept of praise, and so he says your brothers shall praise you, and in Romans, Paul capitalizes on this. He says, Judah is going to be praised by his brothers,
Hmm.
but a spiritual Jew is praised by God Himself.
Right.
So take a look at this passage, then go to Romans 2, around verse 28, and through there, and you'll see how Paul capitalizes on this, talking about Christians being Jews spiritually. But it does already talk about the scepter uh, shall not depart from Judah. How does he translate
Hmm.
um, verse 10? I would like to hear Alter again on verse 10.
The scepter shall not pass from Judah, nor the mace from between his legs, that tribute to him may come, and to him the submission of peoples.
Oh, I think he's fudging there.
Hmm. What do you say?
because the translation, as long as men come to Shiloh, or Ad Ki Yavo Shiloh, uh, well, see, that's the Jewish version. That's not even good either. It's really until Shiloh comes. Ad Ki Yavo Shiloh, until Shiloh comes. I mean, that's really the literal translation.
Instead of
And
what?
it's,
So what do you have?
well, the Jews decided because to make Shiloh a location, which no. I mean, yes, that's true. It did become a
Oh, as long as
location.
men come to Shiloh,
Yeah,
and
but that's
this.
not what it says. It
Uh-huh.
says Ad Ki Avo Shiloh. I mean, until Shiloh comes, and so that became in Christianity a title for the Messiah,
Mm,
and so Shiloh could be translated as loosely "He whose right it is."
mm-hmm,
That's not doing violence to Shiloh as a concept. He whose right it is,
mm-hmm,
but Alter seems to have decided to work around it. I think that's kind of an anti-Christian bias on his part.
mm-hmm.
I don't, of course, I don't know him. I haven't, studied, gone into it with him. But how does he translate it? He does. How does he translate Shiloh as, and it'll be sufficient? Or why don't you read it again?
Um, that tribute to him may come, and to him the submission of peoples. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm,
Ad Kiev O Shiloh, that tribute shall come to him.
mm-hmm.
Well, all right, that makes sense. In other words, but it's where does he get until? Does he
There's
use?
no until. That tribute to him may come, and to him the
Okay, so
submission of peoples. There's no until.
he's translating odd as that
Mm-hmm.
that tribute to him shall come.
Interesting.
All right. Well, does he have a note by it?
He does not have a note about
I'm
that.
surprised
No.
because that's a very controversial verse
Mm-hmm.
because the Jews try to always undermine its Christological importance, whereas
Mm-hmm.
Christians try to emphasize it. Now, let
Now,
me just
certainly, the way he renders it doesn't have an issue with Christology.
right
That Outler,
now.
yeah.
I'd like to mention if you want to get into this in depth, the back in before World War II, the chief rabbi of the British Empire, Hertz, like Renicar, Hertz, wrote a commentary on the Pentateuch, which is still used to this day. And in it, he has a section called "Alleged Christological References in Scripture." So
Alleged.
all of these verses that many of you grew up memorizing in Sunday school or whatever as prophecies of Christ, he tries to undermine
Mm-hmm.
in that section. But it's worth looking at it so
Yeah,
you'll know what at least how Jews spin these verses.
certainly you can. And
Um,
I think sometimes Christians can come with a bit of an arrogance. It's like it's so
hey,
blatantly obvious, and it's like as if people haven't looked at it for thousands of years and come up with other
yeah, it's called the
explanations
Hertz
for
Pentateuch and Haftarot. I guess they call it Haftorahs because it's kind of Ashkenazi spelling, European Jewish spelling, but it's called the Hertz Pentateuch and Haftorahs. And I think a lot of synagogues probably still use it.
it. Hmm. Excuse me. Now, Robert Alter did point out something that comes from Amos Funkenstein, and that is he's a scholar that he quotes sometimes,
Uh,
and that is he thinks there's an interesting double meaning where where it says from the prey of my son you mount, it says the Hebrew can also be construed as from the prey of my son you mounted, which is a shadow reference to Judah's leading part in the plan to pass off Joseph as dead. It's kind of interesting, possible, kind of a fun little.
where was this now?
That is
Verse
verse 9. So
from his prey, my
from the
son.
prey of my son you mounted, he thinks that he takes it as potentially alluding to um talking about Joseph's death. Interesting, possible.
Joseph's being sold into slavery.
Joseph being passed off as dead,
Oh,
right? Because when the bloody tunic was brought to Jacob, he cried out, "Joseph is torn to shreds."
uh,
Tar- Tarof, and the term for prey here is teref. So,
okay, yeah, I see.
uh-huh.
Um,
So that's interesting. Um, Another thing about this, right, is that this imagery you get for Judah is like, you know, masculine beyond belief. You have the pastor who won't pass from Judah. You even have the way he does it, the mace from between his legs, which is
Oh, yeah.
almost you almost you know you might go a little think that's a little bizarre sounding. It's almost sounds a little phallic or something, but I mean it's talking about masculine strength, right? And it's talking about it in this sort of terminology. And I think sometimes people forget that there's that kind of imagery in the Bible, and there's this strength that comes
But
from the line of Judah.
it's interesting though. Alter translates la vie
Hmm.
as a lioness. Well, no, I'm sorry. That's how they translate it. How does he translate as a lion who shall rouse him up? Does he translate it as a lion?
He crouched down like a lion, like the king of beasts. Is that what you're talking about? Verse 9?
Yeah, it says in the Hebrew
He
ukalavi.
crouched, he laid down like a lion, like the king of beasts, and who dare arouse him, is what he has.
That's a very interesting way to translate it. It's just the word in Hebrew. It's just the word lavi,
Mm-hmm.
and but for some reason this translation calls it lioness. I don't know why that is.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway,
Interesting.
he says it's the king of beasts, so he keeps a masculine imagery even in the second word.
Yep.
So I'll check that out because the first word, aryeh, is normally the word for lion.
Mm-hmm.
Gur aryeh Yehuda, Judah is a lion's whelp. But then again it says aryeh, like a lion, and then it says and then it gives a synonym ukilavi mi yukimenu, and who will rise him up, who will rouse him up. And the word here is lavi, and I didn't think of that as feminine before, but I'll check that out. And
Mm-hmm.
nor does alter for that matter.
Nope.
Okay. And I wanted to mention regarding the the uh, the wine here.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that Judah evidently was involved with as part of the history of the tribe, the culture, and the
Interesting.
economy of the tribe. In terms of wine,
Mm-hmm.
and by the way, modern Israel is now becoming a major force in the wine industry.
Hmm.
Besides, in Europe, the Rothschild wines, of course,
Yeah.
even as a minority in Europe, they were involved in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
And for that matter, if you want to go beyond that, in the liquor industry in general, in the hard drink industry, I'm trying to think of the name, but there's a famous name,
For what?
a Jewish family that puts out
Oh,
famous whiskeys, hard drinks. The name isn't coming to me.
apparently you don't consume it because you would
Um,
know. So if you find out, you can always mail it to us and we'll try it. Have a shot on there. Um, the way Robert Alter looks at this in terms of the talking about the donkey and everything is
uh-huh.
is it's that essentially you have so much abundance that it doesn't really matter if the donkey's eating some of it, and then that kind of ties into the fact that he's able to basically use it like water, which of course washing garments in wine, there's a lot of symbolism in that in terms of you can take that a lot of different ways, especially with how wine is used
And
throughout.
and again, I'll say this: verse 12 is Christological because if
Mm-hmm.
you see how Jesus is described in the spirit realm in the Book of Revelation,
Mm-hmm.
he's fiery and he's shining,
Mm-hmm.
and it says here, his eyes shall be red with wine, his teeth white with milk. That actually, in a way, is how John describes his vision in Revelation.
Yeah.
It's also to some degree descriptive of manna, which manna is a type of Christ. If you read John 6.
Mm-hmm. Now, when he says that he renders it eyes that are darker than wine, he
Hmm.
says darker is a tricky word to translate. It's not found
Yeah.
not found in a lot of places.
Hmm.
So, let's keep going. So we have some other ones here. Uh, Zebulun by the sea, he says. Issachar is basically going to be the kind of the blue collar people is what it almost sounds
Yeah,
like.
right.
They're gonna be the laborers that are gonna keep things going.
Zebulun more seafaring, more adventuresome, and Issachar's kind of staying, more landlocked. But later on, when you read about Issachar and Zebulun in Deuteronomy 33, the Jewish tradition, you know, to this day, among the ultra Orthodox Jews, there are those who have more of a talent for making money, and so they do it. But then they support those who
Mm-hmm.
are the scholars who study.
Right.
Issachar is considered the Torah scholars, and Zebulun the religious merchants that keep them going.
No, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's a very traditional Jewish
Interesting.
approach to it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um. Okay, so Dan, it talks about kind of the guerrilla warfare style that they're kind of lying there on the path and they attack and everything. But then it has that random verse from out of the blue where it says, "Your deliverance I await, O Lord."
Let me say about Dan
Mm-hmm.
that Samson comes from Dan,
That's true.
and you see the role he plays
Yep.
later on. Um, if you go to the book of Revelation, you'll find the 12 tribes are mentioned there. Now, I don't want to get into how to interpret that, but Dan is left out there, and so that ties in here. This is prophetic here. I will wait for your salvation, O Lord. There's something about the tribe of Dan that at the end, it's not that there can't be people from Dan saved, but there aren't 12,000 that are set apart like with the other tribes. Uh, and I know there are textual critics that argue, but if you just look at the generally received text, Dan is left out.
Mm-hmm.
And here it says, "I wait for your salvation." And if you study the history of Dan, they become idolatrous very early and remain loyal to that all the way through their
Mm-hmm.
history. They never uh, get over this
Mm-hmm.
interest in idolatry. They have their own kind of counterfeit religion going.
Right.
They have a Levite who actually is Moses' grandson, who performs as a priest for them, and they have their own kind of version or perversion of the religion that they
Right.
keep all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, evidently, that's partly why this verse is here.
Yeah, it is interesting. That's one of those. That's one of those puzzling questions that doesn't have a great answer. It comes up from time to time, is why Dan is absent in Revelation. So, well, we've gotten up to Dan, but there are more tribes to come. Do you have any other thoughts about the ones that we looked up here before we move forward?
I just want to mention, just for the sake of updating people so people are aware, there were Jews in Ethiopia, and the question was, how should they be viewed by the Israeli community? And most Israelis, of course, were willing to accept them, but there had to be some kind of technicality that would allow them to be considered part of the Jewish community. So the chief Sephardic rabbi decided that they were part of the lost tribe of Dan, and
Hmm.
that made it okay to absorb the entire community into Israel. So, but
Interesting.
anthropologists would contest that. But
Hmm.
I just thought I'd mention it,
That is interesting.
just so that as part of your awareness.
Right. All right, well, we will be back with more tribes. So, if you're enjoying this, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, and we will see you tomorrow.